Hello everyone, I hope you're having a great day. This is Story Dive, just doing a quick response to the new Dark Crytal Age of Resistance trailer that was released by Netflix a week ago. So I'm doing a somewhat late response, just giving my thoughts on mainly the visuals and this new Dark Crytal series, which will premiere on the 30th of August on Netflix. My general review of the visuals is simply that I think it looks great. I was reading the Facebook comments of a friend of mine who was getting a little angry because there's obviously some CG in this trailer, mainly the backgrounds, and even though the characters are all classic puppetry done in a very similar way as the original Dark Crytal, this friend who will remain nameless is such a purist that he was like, oh, I don't want any CG, it's gotta be all puppets and practical effects like the original. Well, keep in mind the original used optical effects, so not everything you see in the original was actually in front of the camera. That would be pretty much impossible for wide shots of the landscape. But in response to my friend and people who think like my friend, I am a huge fan of puppetry and the art of puppetry, and I hope that in this age of CGI, fans of the art of puppetry can foster their own resistance to CGI in a sense and keep puppetry alive. But in my opinion, the only way we can keep puppetry alive is if film and television projects use hybrid techniques combining puppetry with CGI. At this point, doing everything practical, I think, is just not logistically sound anymore. The amount of effort and work that went into films like the original Dark Crytal, the original Labyrinth, if you watch the making of either of those, you will see that the amount of work and money and time that is required to make everything practical, the backgrounds and everything, not just the characters, is immense and very expensive. The original Dark Crytal film had a $25 million budget, which was fairly big in the early 80s. Not huge, but it was an expensive undertaking, and it didn't even make double that back in terms of box office. Of course, in the over 35 years since its release, it did go on to make a lot of money through VHS, DVD, Blu-ray sales, etc., gradually becoming a cult classic, much like Jim Henson's follow-up fantasy film Labyrinth. But my point is, logistically speaking, to do everything in practical effects, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you can't justify why you're spending that money. And I think in terms of the background, the landscapes, etc., I have to agree that the extra budget and trouble doesn't necessarily justify the end product. Something that I think CGI is great at is the backgrounds, the landscapes, etc. For me, where CGI gets into trouble sometimes is in characters, and specifically characters close up. If they're completely CGI and not done properly, they don't feel tactile. There are exceptions to this. For instance, pretty much anything Andy Serkis serves as the reference and voice to. But even then, even Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, to me, sometimes looked a little weightless and hollow. This, however, is never a problem when you use puppetry and there is something tactile right there in front of the camera. The drawbacks, of course, are that puppetry is also limited. It's hard to create a character that has all the same facial expressions as a human, because our faces have God knows how many muscles. And even in films like the original Dark Crytal and Labyrinth, and as we see in this new Age of Resistance trailer, the characters can seem a little bit stiff, but it's a trade-off. And what you get by trading in a little bit of stiffness is this beautiful tactile work of art that sits right in front of the camera and registers in your brain in that visceral way that you feel like you can reach out and touch. However, everything I just said I don't necessarily think needs to be applied to the backgrounds, and from what I see in this trailer, the backgrounds look amazing. They look luscious, and they seem to integrate really well with the puppets. They seem to have expanded the world of the Dark Crytal. Thra. I'm sure if Jim Henson was still around and he was making the series, he would expand what Thra is using the technology of today, and they seem to be doing that, while striking a balance with the traditional puppetry. Visually speaking, I think they've struck the perfect balance. Another great example of a hybrid CGI puppetry movie that I thought looked amazing is the 2009 Where the Wild Things Are movie. That movie had problems in terms of its story, but I thought visually it looked amazing. This makes me think that if there is a future for puppetry in films, it's going to be a future of hybrid techniques, meaning puppetry and digital effects. Maybe we can coin a term for this, like PCGI or PAD, puppetry and digital. I don't know, you guys could probably come up with a better name for puppets and CGI than me. The Gelfling characters look pretty much exactly like Jen and Kira. Of course, they are not Jen and Kira. These characters are Ryan, Deet, and Brea, but they definitely have the same feel as Jen and Kira, although a little bit more polished, I would say. Chamberlain or Skeksil and the other Skeksis look exactly like they did in the original. I'm not sure who voices Chamberlain in this series. He was voiced by Frank Oz in the original, but whoever does in this series has got the impression down pat.
Tell no one. It's time to make my move.
Better than my impression.
I hate your whimper.
So all in all, visually speaking, I love the way the Gelfling look, the Skeksis, Aughra, Fizzgig. To me, this looks on point. I know they're not working with the biggest budget, and I'm extremely happy with what I see here. The only question now is how good will the story, the directing, and the acting be? Well, speaking on the acting, I don't think we have anything to worry about because the voice cast is star-studded. I mean, Helen Bonham Carter, Mark Hamill, Tom Strong, Toby Jones, Simon Pegg, to name a few. It seems like a lot of actors who were affected by the original have come out to act for this series, so I'm not worried about the acting. The directing, on the other hand, it's directed by Louis Leterrier, who is an accomplished French director. He directed the 2008 Hulk, Transporter 1 and 2, Now You See Me, which are all competent movies, but not really the type of movies that you would associate with Dark Crystal. That gives me a bit of pause. But on the Dark Crystal website, Leterrier made a statement saying that he was deeply affected by the Dark Crystal. He felt the creativity of the original film was limitless and it was groundbreaking, and he wants to work closely with the Jim Henson Creature Shop and the Frouds who designed the original characters, so he seems to have the right attitude. I wish he had a project in his past that was a little similar to the Dark Crystal, but I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. That only leaves the story. The Dark Crystal world has been written about in novels and comics and various adaptations within the universe, and it's a rich world and universe that a lot could be done with, so they definitely can make a compelling story. The creators, Jeffrey Addis and Will Matthews, I don't really know anything about. I'm not familiar with their work. Most of the other writers I'm also not familiar with. They've done a few things here and there I've seen, but generally I can't speak on their work with the exception of J.M. Lee, who is listed as writing one episode. J.M. Lee wrote a series of novels based on the Dark Crystal and is instrumental in filling out the universe. But the other writers and the creators I can't really speak on. That means, to me, the story is a question mark. I'll have to comment on it after it's released on August 30th. But like I said before, my impressions of this trailer are that it looks amazing. I'm very happy with the visuals, and I don't see any reason to doubt the project at this point. I don't see any real red flags or flaws. But I would love to know what you think in the comments below. What did you think of this trailer? How do you think it looks? Are you a puppetry purist like my friend and you don't want any CGI in this at all? Do you doubt this project, or do you think they're going to hit it out of the park? What do you think about the future of puppetry? Do you think the future of puppetry has to be a combination, a hybrid with puppetry and CGI, as seen in the newer Star Wars movies? Or do you think there is a future for pure puppetry, on film or on TV? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more Dark Crystal related videos and Henson related videos, etc. Be sure to come back and join me for my review of the series when it's finally released. Thank you for watching. Until the Age of Resistance.